All right, we're getting started. So we're going to talk tonight about Julian Assange, one of the greatest journalists of all time, one of the greatest advocates for freedom. Kendra Christian is back. She was here almost 3 years ago, and she's back from Denver, freed Assange. So give it up.
All right, thanks everybody. Can you hear me on this mic, or is that sounding good? Okay.
It comes off the stand if you want.
Oh, I do. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not good at everything. Okay, well, as I had just a few short months ago, was ready for a much different speech tonight. But as you can see, Julian Assange is free. So, yes. Thank you. And, I would like everybody, just one more round of applause for the Libertarian Party, who has been so supportive of our group, because everybody in here had something to do with that. So one more round of applause for you guys. Okay, so I want to start off just by saying there's a lot of people in this room, and per WikiLeaks and his lawyers, attorneys, everybody, it really was a group effort. It took everybody's commitment to free Assange. But before we get into some of the details with that, I just want to walk it back a bit and remind everybody, who Julian Assange is. That since 2010. When he started releasing the Iraq-Afghanistan war logs, he's been, pursued by our government, by, the Swedish government, even his own kind of left him in the lurch. So, and it was 2012 is when he had asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. All right, so that's 12 years ago. Imagine that, that he really has been, basically incarcerated, if you want to say. I mean, everybody here remembers, what happened when people were just locked in their house for a couple weeks. People went insane. So this guy was in the embassy for, 7 long years. Just a reminder to people that even while he was in the embassy, he continued to publish all of these here under there. You can't see it all that well, but he did Vault 7. Let me read my stuff here. The DNC leaks came out. He just kept hitting it hard while he was in the embassy. So what happened? In 2019, he was, we call it basically an illegal rendition out of the embassy, broke all the normal laws of asylum, international asylum, which is basically, a sacred thing in the world. We have our own Senator Bennett to thank for pushing that along. He was one of the, I believe it was 9 or 12 senators that had pressured Mike Pence at the time to get with Ecuador, and we gave them a nice $4.7 billion IMF loan to get Julian Assange out of that embassy. So that whole thing in itself was an operation. At the beginning, when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, it was pretty friendly. But the last year there, it was like room, 101 from 1984. He's being illegally spied on. By the way, there is still a case going against UC Global in the Spanish courts. And all of the information that they were getting, including with his lawyers, his medical doctors, everything was being sent straight back to the CIA here. So after he was taken, he was put into Belmarsh prison. And Belmarsh prison is, we were calling it the equivalent to our Guantanamo, but it's a high security prison in the UK, housing the most dangerous criminals there. And keep in mind that Assange was there for 5 long years in solitary. And he was never even convicted of a crime. He was only there on remand. So even people like Pinochet were given house arrest in that situation, but not Julian Assange. So, and what was he charged for? Important to remember, because the WikiLeaks did leak so much information, but it was the collateral murder video that everybody saw from Iraq, which was where Reuters journalists were gunned down. The Guantanamo files, the Afghan war diaries, and then also the Iraq war logs. So just a reminder, if he was extradited, so he was charged under 17 counts under the Espionage Act, 1 count under the Computer Abuse and Fraud Act. And what he was looking at facing when he came here was a closed trial, so none of us would know about it. He was the first journalist to ever be charged under the Espionage Act. We've charged plenty of whistleblowers, but never a journalist. So this was quite the escalation. And this happened under Trump administration as well as the Biden administration. And yes, Obama has credit for not pulling the trigger, but quite frankly, I'm sure that if it was his turn to pull the trigger, it would have been pulled, right? Because there was the secret grand jury indictment going on that WikiLeaks had known about. That was part of him being, taking asylum and all of this. He knew that there was a process going for him. So even after he was taken out of the embassy, did you see any, apologizing from the mainstream media or anybody like that who had smeared him for close to a decade about, faking it, being in the embassy, that he could just walk free any day? Of course not. Everything that he had said was going to happen, happened, and perhaps even worse than he may have expected. So once here, there's something in the US called special administrative measures. And that's part of what I was talking about, where it would have been, a closed court. His lawyers would have been gagged. We would have not been able to know what was going on. He would have very limited communication. John Kiriakou had described other people who were under special administrative measures as breaking glass and eating it so that they could get to the nurse and see another human being. So basically a dungeon here in the US that admittedly, before I had gotten into this, I would have not even thought existed in this country. So one thing to also keep in mind is that over the past 5 years, with serious effort by people who knew the truth about this case, we compounded the support. It just continued to increase exponentially. It had gotten, when I first started, there were maybe a couple people, online. I was able to almost follow everybody that was supporting him, and that just increased dramatically, over, I'd say it was the second year that we got all of these human rights orgs. So we had over 40 major human rights and free press orgs against this, speaking out openly against this. You even had the mainstream media making statements that this was, contrary. Granted, they were still smearing him, but still that this was terrible for the free press, which it really was. And also, this was a situation where it wasn't just the free press in the United States, it was the free press, global free press in the world. It made it, we were about to set a precedent that any journalist anywhere could be extradited by another country and charged under that country's own domestic spy laws. So really just a terrible escalation against our right to know globally. Here's an example though, let's talk about this year. So 2024, beginning of this year. What we were looking at was Julian Assange's final appeal. So this is just an example of how many people were supporting Assange. So we've got, I think it ended up being over 24 countries, 85 different cities were holding protests for that. A lot of people here, Jessica and both Jacob spoke at our rally for Day X. So just, the fervor was there. The action on the street was happening. And just to go over, I don't know how much you guys know about the final appeal, but these are just some of the points that they were working to appeal. I'm not going to go through everything because probably already I'm long on where I expected my presentation to be, but thank you. But one was just that it was a political offense. That's what he was being charged for. You know, it wasn't, he hadn't really actually committed any crime. This was a political issue. Another thing that they were bringing up in the appeal is that it had come out while he was in Belmarsh that our government under Mike Pompeo had the CIA plotted to murder him. And also they noted in the appeal that his First Amendment rights he wouldn't have First Amendment rights here because he was an Australian citizen. That was a thing they weren't sure about. Although keep in mind that under the Espionage Act court, you don't have that ability to raise that defense anyway. So it's kind of an interesting thing that happened there with the appeal. The other thing, again, which is why he originally was not extradited in the first place, was our death penalty. That's against UK extradition treaty. So that was another point of appeal that they had brought up. So what was the outcome? So they denied all the points except for two that related to the First Amendment point that I had just gone over, mainly that as an Australian citizen, he wouldn't have First Amendment rights here, and then also the death penalty issue, which after that happened, what the UK courts had given the US is they gave them the opportunity to provide assurances. So basically saying, we are not going to do those things. Okay, so that's the situation we were in 2024, at the beginning of 2024. I just want to go over this real quick. I'm just going to read this language just because it was such a kangaroo court that was going on in the UK too. I mean, that could be an entire other presentation. But the concerns that arise under these grounds may be capable of being addressed by assurances that the applicant is permitted to rely on the First Amendment, that the applicant is not prejudiced at trial, including sentence, by reason of his nationality, that he is afforded the same First Amendment protections as a United States citizen, and that the death penalty is not imposed. So, I mean, there you have even the UK court telling the US government exactly what they needed to say for assurances so that they could approve the extradition. One thing I did want to note on a point that they weren't going to allow into the appeal hearing, which you can see my title for that there. They were not going to allow the evidence showing that Mike Pompeo and our government and the CIA had plotted to murder him. They were not going to allow that in because that didn't have to do specifically with the extradition. So it's quite an insane thing to think about. But anyhow, we'll keep going. Okay, so where we were at was the US was unable to provide assurances for that. So, and that's partly because it would be up to our courts here whether he would have First Amendment rights or not. The attorneys in this extradition hearing, they could not guarantee that. So they did not accept the assurances provided by the US. So this was set to go to a final appeal hearing July 9th and 10th, okay? And I think that was when, it was like shortly before that, I think that we had decided, we put this date on the calendar. Because I remember our group was doing a big postcard campaign, and then we had this on the calendar. So, a big surprise happened. You cannot lose them all right? So on June 24th, much to the surprise of several of us, I mean, there had been talks of an appeal, but nobody was certain for it. Us personally, at this time, our Denver group, we tweeted out in support of that. Certainly, Julian Assange is not responsible for the free press of the world. You know, he wasn't a sacrificial lamb to be put on the stake. He certainly had already paid for things enough. So we supported an appeal. And that's what happened. He took an appeal. But I'll go through the details now. So on June 24th, he boarded a plane out of the UK, out of London. This is Stella Assange. Julian is free. Words cannot express our immense gratitude to you. Yes, you, who have all mobilized for years and years to make this come true. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think that's a really important point because it was a very similar thing that got Manning out. It was a small group of people just committed to not giving up. And that's even to, Brandon's point that he brought up earlier. That's like, that's all you need, really. You just have to keep going. And especially in this case, we had the truth 100% was on our side. He really did nothing wrong. Here's the WikiLeaks statement there. I won't go over the entire thing there, but after more than 5 years in a 2x3 meter cell, isolated 23 hours a day, he will soon reunite with his wife, Stella Assange, and their children who have only known their father from behind bars. So keep in mind, his children were growing up through this. They were, when they went to visit him in Belmarsh, they were searched by dogs, their mouths were searched. I mean, it was just a terrible, terrible situation. And another reminder that he was there on remand in that situation. So even as this was happening, the whole internet was, a buzz. Like everybody was like, what? Oh my God, we can't believe it. And really, I thought that I didn't think he would make it alive. I thought he was going to be extradited and there was a serious risk of suicide. So, but just here's an example again. That was that Day X protest of just all the people that mobilized together to continue to fight for his freedom. So there he is on the plane from the UK. He did have to stop in Saipan. 1.49 million posts during this time. It was just incredible. So nobody was certain that Assange would be free. Like nobody trusted what was gonna happen. We didn't know, is someone gonna nab him on the way? So there was a flight tracker going on. Everybody was watching him from point to point. So that's him getting off of the plane into Saipan. And then what happened in Saipan? A couple of things that we're going to point out here. So out of that whole 17-count indictment under the Espionage Act, he only pleaded guilty to 1 count there. So it was really an amazing plea deal that his attorneys arranged, okay? And that was, these are his words in the hearing. Working as a journalist, I encouraged my source to provide information that was said to be classified in order to publish that information. I believe that the First Amendment protected that activity. So do I. And I'm sure that everybody else in this room agrees to that too. So what he pled guilty to was journalism. And then I have, my tweet down here, which I just have to bring up because it was a huge smear and very difficult for us in this case to fight against. And that's the idea that he had caused harm. However, the US government in the Manning hearing admitted that not a single person was harmed. Again, in the first extradition hearing in the UK, admitted again that nobody was harmed, and this is the US government admitting it. And here they are now in the final plea hearing, admitted it again. Also, government indicated that there is no personal victim here, so the action did not result in any known physical injury. 2 relevant facts. Pretty big, fact there, considering what our media tried to portray to everybody about Julian Assange. What's one of the best things about this plea agreement is that he is entirely free. So he is not, gagged in any way. He is they can't bring any other charges against him for any of the other previous leaks done by WikiLeaks, so he is completely free. Yeah. One point that came up that some of you may have heard about is that they did instruct him to tell, the editor of WikiLeaks now that if there was anything not published, that, they should destroy anything that hadn't been published yet. And I really like this tweet. It didn't get too many likes online, but I thought it was very wonderful. I issue you an instruction to delete this tweet. Let's see how well that works. So it really wasn't even that big of a, caveat to his freedom. Okay. This is just going over again the specific, what he specifically had pled to, which was information charging the defendant with conspiracy to obtain documents, writings, and notes connected with national defense, and willfully communicate documents relating to the national defense, from a person having both lawful and unauthorized possession of the same. This is just more about how he is completely able to go as a free man. And so that's just a pretty amazing thing. You know, it's something that honestly, I still can't believe at times that's happened. And I just want to remind everybody, this is a statement from the UN Rapporteur on Torture, who had visited Assange in May of 2019, so shortly after he was placed in Belmarsh. And it was then that Julian Assange, by two separate people, was declared a psychological torture victim. And his statement was, in 20 years of work with victims of war, violence, and political persecution, I have never seen a group of democratic states gang up to deliberately isolate, demonize, and abuse a single individual for such a long time. So, very well-deserved freedom for Julian Assange. And there he is. Yeah, here, that's right. And there he is. That's one of the first shots of him walking out, finally, as a free man. Here's everybody still tracking his flight to make sure that he made it home to Australia. Jaraparia is, strong supporter of WikiLeaks, and already he was saying, "Who's in Canberra? Head to the airport tonight. Make sure there are people there to greet him." And there were a bunch of people showed up to greet him, and that's him, giving the sign off the plane to all his supporters there. There he is again, getting off. Just pretty amazing. And then just some wonderful pictures here of him finally, able to hug his wife. They had gotten married in Belmarsh. And then you can't see it too well, but that's his father there also was there to greet him. And what an amazing family they were. It was a huge uptick in support. They worked around the clock, Stella mainly in Europe. Both Gabriel Shipton and John had come here, to the US. We hosted them a couple different times. Absolutely amazing family, amazing men, really just wonderful, wonderful people. So, Assange is free. Yeah. Okay. All right. So still have a little bit here, which we'll go through pretty fast, but just to note, where are we at in as far as free press is concerned when something like that could happen to a man who's, look at all of these awards that he received for his journalism. So much so that they've actually made a book out of it, which if anybody wants this link, I can get it to you. And I don't know if this is going to work because the internet was possibly not working. But here, just for this presentation, I wanted to check out the full plea agreement again and make sure I could, snip out some slides for this. So I had gone to, is it going to work? So I had gone here. So here we are with the press release, right? Let's see if it still happens. I mean, and this is a pretty important decision, don't you think, right? First time we ever, right? So let's see if we can go here. Page not found. Already. They count on people not looking at stuff like that and not noticing. So, how do I go back to my slide?
Should be on the bottom somewhere. I don't know which icon. There's a lot.
Sorry, guys. There we go. Look at that. Okay. All right. So just real quick, where are we with free press? So a lot of people, I know the Libertarian Party had held a huge rally, Rage Against the War, also supporting Assange quite a few years back. There's our lovely Congress sending, billions and billions of dollars overseas, clapping like seals there for Zelensky. And what about the free press? What happened to the free press there? So Gonzalo Lira is an American journalist who was reporting in Ukraine. He was tortured by Ukraine, imprisoned, tortured, and murdered. And what's happened for him? Nothing. This is a US citizen over there, right? So since the start of that war, and actually this even includes what happened in the Donbass, and then up to 2022, 18 journalists and media workers have been killed in that war. But I have to say that nothing really compares to what's happening right now with the situation in Israel. One other thing to note, currently there's a case against, it's called the Huru 3 case. This also has to do with this kind of Russiagate type thing going on. And I don't know, I'm not gonna speak too much about this just because I don't know the exact details, but it's another issue of free speech. It's one that's really going on under the radar. And it's something that all of us here should probably commit to learning more about, because it's another one where our free press is on the line. So just real quick, I'll go through these pretty quickly, but what's happening over there in Palestine is just unprecedented. I personally am completely scarred by the things that I've seen there. In less than a year, and this is us, we're paying for all these. We've dropped more tons of bombs than London, Hiroshima, and Dresden during World War II. And note this, Gaza is the size of Denver. It's the same square kilometers. This is a map of what's happened there. Over 564 schools in Gaza bombed. 16,000 children. These figures are hard to get exact figures. Some people estimate as high as 20,000. And I'm just put this slide in here again, just to remind people that that collateral murder video where people saw, journalists being, gunned down. I mean, these leaks stopped that war. People were outraged by that, and we're just not seeing the same thing. So I'm bringing it up here too, because I also wonder, like, what's happening? What's happening? Why is this still happening? This is just some things. I'm just gonna read you a couple of things. This is just from August 1st. I lost a brother, sister, wife, 2 sons, more than 50 cousins, nieces, nephews, and around 100 relatives. 3 of my sons and 1 daughter were wounded. I lost my house, business, office, and was displaced more than 10 times. And that's a journalist there reporting on the ground in Gaza. This is August 5th. Israel handed over 80 unidentified and decomposed bodies to Gaza Ministry of Health. August 9th, Israel just murdered 100 sheltering in a school. June 13th, U.S. involved in Israeli massacre of 274 Palestinians. July 31st, Israel has just murdered Palestinian Al Jazeera journalist. May 31st, another attack in Jabalaya. So it's just, these are day after day. If you're paying attention to this with some of these journalists that are on the X platform is one of the main places where you can still find free speech. And no, I am not Elon Musk is a free speech king kind of person. But still, it's some of what we have now. So it's just basically been a collateral murder every day since October 7th. Okay, and also just please keep in mind, I don't know, there's a lot going on, so it's not so easy to keep track of everything. But pretty much everything that was said at the beginning on October 7th has been proven, has been debunked. You know, there were not 40 dead babies. There was not this mass rape going on. Most of the civilians that were killed were actually killed with killed by Israeli IDF soldiers. And just in this short time, over 165 journalists have been killed in Gaza. So that's it's just an insane number, okay? Just to give you an idea, the amount of civilians that have died in Ukraine is around 7,000, and that's in 2 years. As compared to, and this is also considered to be a lower estimated number. Right now I'm seeing up to like 40,000, but 37,000 civilians killed. And most of those, 52% of those are women and children. So just another idea of what we have from our media. It's just an example of The Guardian and how they report on each thing. IDF says it has entered Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital in targeted operation against Hamas, as compared to no words for this horror over Russian bombing of Kiev Children's Hospital. So you just see the propaganda there at work. And also we have, within this country, one thing to bring up is just how divided people are on issues and supporting things that are true because they go to a certain side, And we saw that, I think, especially I saw that in the Rage Against the War protest that the Libertarian Party put on, because what came out there was this boutique left, right, that didn't want to unite because of certain speaker here, a certain speaker there, and, just ridiculous. And we still had a very successful protest. But I have to say, what's happening with some of these, and don't get me wrong, I commend them being out there and fighting for the Palestinians, I really do. But when you're fighting against that and one of the things that you're saying is, no borders, it's just a lack of understanding, right, of who benefits from having that power, who benefits from no borders. It's not people, yes, it's a nice idea, but those kind of ideas are, they take advantage of people, they take advantage of their heartstrings, of these utopia ideals. That's what they do, So, and one other thing, since this is a presentation on Julian Assange, I just want to note that back in 2014, okay, so when he was in the embassy, what was he already exposing? Ban Ki-moon worked with Israel to undermine Gaza. 56 US cables refer to Israel's ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So already these things being reported, right? But Assange so smeared that just a few number of people were doing, things. Like, could that have been prevented? Yes, it could have if just that huge propaganda attack wasn't going on, just relentless against him. So anyhow, and here's our lovely Congress again, clapping like seals for a foreign leader. And there's people in Congress that could, call people racist for having the American flag on their porch, right? I mean, come on. Old Netanyahu, who's a complete war criminal, much like all of our presidents, 70 standing ovations in this speech. I mean, it's just gross. So anyway, let's bring it back to a great man, Julian Assange. And remember that if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. And there's a picture of him, finally, with, sun on his face. Well, it's a little bit cloudy that day, but whatever. I'm sure he was fine with it. His wife and his boys, finally. And I have a lot of updates. I know that I already, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. So thanks everybody for listening to me. Thank you. Thank you also, just real quick, for your support of Julian Assange for these past 5 years, for your support of our grassroots group here in Denver. It's really meant a lot. The Libertarian Party has been phenomenal. You guys are just wonderful. Thank you for sticking to your values on free press. It's meant a lot to us. And I did have one question, and that was, some of you may have seen that they were going to charge Julian Assange like $520,000 for these flights to get him home. And I did have the question as to, who ended up paying for that, because they were fundraising for that. So it was actually the person who put that, a lot of people contributed, but the person who paid the majority of that was Jack Dorsey. Yeah, so. Okay, do we have any questions?
Not so much a question, but a statement of appreciation. Thank you very much for giving us the information that you had throughout this whole thing and watching how it has turned around and become something to a real spectacular victory. And congratulations to you for being so supportive and being far in there. And another great thank you. Thank you for coining the phrase boutique left. That is awesome. So thank you, Kendra. Appreciate the information.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, this is about honesty, although I'd love to take credit for that, but that I heard first from Max Blumenthal. So, thank you.
Yeah, so I have I guess I'm a little bit confused about what the ultimate where the ultimate decision came from of letting him go. Was it because the last appeal was successful in a way, or because they could have just kept him there since he was in remand, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Exactly what was it that pushed that over the edge? From that slide that I had showed with WikiLeaks, they really said it was a combination of things happening. So the support in Australia was up to like 90% that wanted to see him home. So there were people really pressuring the government there. They had quite a few actual MPs in Congress or in their parliament that were supporting Assange. They had come to the United States. We also had that House Resolution 934 in place that we had quite a few members, I think it was up to 13, that had signed on to. It was also an election season. Their Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he got a lot of credit for this because he ran on that there and then was pretty silent. So he was heavily pressured in Australia, and he did speak out publicly. Not as much as anybody on the ground would have liked, but I think there were many things going on behind closed doors. They also said that what happened in the case there for the appeal that gave them a hole to get in, that gave his legal team a hole to get in there because the US was probably not going to be successful. They would have been going against their own things. Now, I wonder myself about it. I think a lot of it also had to do with the public pressure. I think that was a huge thing, right? Because that just continued to mount. We're in an election year here right now. Who wants that issue here? So easy for everybody to run against the Democrats saying, oh, well, we'd free Assange, whether they would or not. Easy for them to do that. And I wondered too, I'm like, if Assange was here, things are being fomented here to start, right? I think everybody can see that. But would they really want an actual revolution on their hand around something, significant? So what we've heard, the official statement is that it was just a combination of everything. But Anthony Albanese did pressure us to let him go. So I hope that was a decent answer. All right.
As we creep closer toward a literal or figurative one world government, what future do you see for journalism in a hopeful way? I'd love to hear something hopeful.
Well, I think that I think that this is really hopeful, what happened with Assange. I think that's a big deal. There are all kinds of different theories around about it, but this was something that we weren't going to stop fighting for, but it's one that the world should take as a win, and what we should do is just put more pressure on. And the thing is that, there's always that tipping point where when things get so bad, right, more and more people start to wake up. So I see that happening in these spaces going on Twitter right now, where it's just a lot of times just regular people coming in there and talking all together. There's a lot of crazy arguments. It's never the best debating. Nobody's really formal about it. But people are waking up, and truth is getting out. And so I think that's hopeful. But as far as governments are concerned, I have no hopium for you. Richard Medhurst was just detained in the UK, questioned for 24 hours there. That's happened to several journalists there. I had pointed out what happened with the Uhuru. That case is going on right now. That's one that our group will probably do some postcard campaigning, calls to Congress, that type of thing. So the assault is on by pretty much all Western governments against the truth.
My question is, do you know what his future plans are? Do you know if he's gonna continue being at WikiLeaks or plan on releasing any new information or publishing anything?
So Assange right now is not, necessarily, WikiLeaks has sort of already been turned over. There's a new editor there. So it's kind of, nobody's 100% sure exactly what Assange is going to do. He hasn't spoken to the public quite yet. He's, taking this time to kind of probably come back to himself. It was quite the ordeal after those years. I do know, and I have this up right here, there's some minutes that another wonderful activist out of Boston, Paula, had taken, his brother Gabriel Shipton. They still plan to do heavy lobbying here for a pardon. And that's something that I would encourage everybody here to do as well, especially as we're in an election season. Don't let them get away with that. Make them have that as an issue. Whoever your candidate is that you're going with, push them to keep talking about that. That's one thing that our group will be doing, because while a judicial precedent is not set by a plea, you can already see they're just moving forward with free press as if the entire, he was indicted for all of those things. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know.
Hi. I love Kendra, obviously. The first time I met, you were at the 2021 End the Wars rally we did. I think that was the first time I became,
Yes.
Anyway, so anytime I've gone and spoken at the Free Assange rallies, the journalists don't show up. There was a guy from the jazz station this year, I remember, but the actual journal, and the year before they showed up, but basically just wrote a hit piece on me and didn't, they talked a little bit about Assange. So that's what's sad about this and what makes you think it's all that's what you get in conspiracy stuff. And I appreciate you for bringing up that there are bad actors in the pro-Palestine stuff. We're leading it here at the college, who also are they were trying to disarm us as people. Well, guess what leads to genocide is when you disarm the people, whether it's quick or slow. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because that was a hard thing to kind of, as libertarians, are yeah, we hate what's going on over there. We hate war. But also these they don't know what they're doing at some of these. They're showing up at the CU Regent's house and it's the same person every time, leading it. So that makes it seem sketchy and all that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for kind of saying that diplomatically.
No, thank you for, and that's one thing too, is that I think that's it's a tricky situation that we're in here with that, right? Because we still have to stand up for what's right, but those are some really scary things happening. And to Jessica's point, it was KGNU supported us here. That's our only free press. I mean, Denver is maybe worse than DC, probably not, just because DC is more concentrated, but we're pretty freaking close. I mean, we do not have free press here. It was a scary thing to find out. And also basically no representation. We caught, I always like to bring it up when I can, we caught Diana DeGette with her office closed on a Tuesday. I think that's the only reason we got a meeting with her.
People keep their offices in private buildings where you can't just march up to them. How convenient for them.
Exactly. We were trying to just deliver an information packet, and the only place we were able to do that, we were stopped by security everywhere else. We were stopped by security at DeGette's, told to make a meeting, and this is after obviously multiple meeting requests. Same thing with Bennett. Where we were able to get in was Hickenlooper, Mike and I. And the way we did that is we just pretended like we knew where we were going. Yeah. And then, it's so Orwellian when you get in there, we got into the, they asked, the security did try to stop us. They were like, where are you going? We're like, just to meet with at Hickenlooper's office. Well, if you look online, it says offices 10 through 321. What the hell is that? Then we got into the elevator and there were no buttons. So luckily, one of his aides was there to get us up, and then we did deliver our packet, but nothing came from that. But something as simple as that, a constituent trying to just give somebody some information, hand deliver it, not possible.
What book would you recommend to anybody that wants to read the full picture and the story of what he went through and why all of this happened?
Gosh, there are, I definitely think The Trial of Julian Assange by Nils Meltzer is an excellent book. There's also one out by Stephanie Marizzi. The documentary was Ithaca, and that was a movie about his family working to free him. There's also a film called The War on Journalism by Juan Passarelli, and that's free that you can get online. And I will get you, both Kevin Gastala and Stephanie Marizzi wrote books about it as well, and I will get you guys the names of those too, once I can look it up on here. But those three, I would say, are really good books to read.
You already spoke regarding part of my question, but I would like to concentrate. So, about 3 months ago, I believe Trump said that he would pardon Assange if he would become president. And right now we see that Assange is pardoned, kind of. Do you think it's was some kind of trick by Democratic government against Trump, and they decided to just leave Assange just to hurt Trump? Or is it possible that Assange would be pardoned without this election year?
So he is still not pardoned, so keep that in mind, just the plea agreement, right? So that's still on the table, although I do think it was strategic for the Democrats to do that, to go with this plea agreement. I think that at least most people in the Assange camp didn't trust that Trump would pardon Assange. He had the opportunity to do that when he was leaving office, same as he did for the January 6th protesters that didn't do anything. So it's hard to say, and they still have the one thing that Gabriel Shipton and the rest of us will be focused on, and I guess it's specifically going to happen, the main focus will be in January, because that's the best time to catch these guys for a pardon. So we will still be trying to work on that with Biden to get him to pardon Assange, but it's hard to say. However, I do think it was very politically strategic of them to do so, because they took that off the table for everybody as a running point.
Question, so you mentioned Jack Dorsey was the one who paid for the flight. Who confirmed that? Because that's the first I'm hearing of that.
Gabriel Shipton. Yes.
No, it was done in Bitcoin, right?
I believe so, yeah. Okay. And I have that, that was actually, it's in these notes, because that was somebody's question. Yeah, it just says Jack Dorsey contributed a huge for the 520K. So I can't confirm it was Bitcoin or how exactly it was done.
Okay, because that was published maybe 2 months ago that an anonymous person had donated the Bitcoin. And I was curious as to why it would be in Bitcoin if it's someone like Jack Dorsey, who obviously has enough money to do it in regular money, in fiat money.
Well, I can't confirm. I don't know if it was Bitcoin or not.
Okay.
I can ask, though, and try to get you info on it.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to know, because that's what the report was.
Okay.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Kendra, thank you for your activism and your passion, and I hope you stay active and keep being involved and keep fighting for freedom or liberty or whatever you believe. Please keep that passion going. But one of the things I heard is that part of the deal, I guess, with Assange was that WikiLeaks had to take some of the DNC emails down or some of the documents. Is that not true at all?
So that's not true. Actually, WikiLeaks site has been having issues since, during the whole proceeding. So even like a year into him being in Belmarsh, there were some issues with the site. But no, that was not part of the deal. And I think we follow each other. So I can send you, I will look for it. But Stella Assange also confirmed that that was not true. Yeah.
Are they issues with the site or issues with the site?
Well, that would be hard to know, right? But I don't think that it necessarily comes from, WikiLeaks. That information's up there, but that's those are Those are some of those questions that result from just having absolutely no free press, right? Yeah, so, but I hear you. I mean, supporters too, especially people that digging in there, are like, what's going on with the site? And then it was crashing and, very easy. I mean, they were just attacked all the time, WikiLeaks was, even when it was up and running, 100% without Assange in prison, so.
Last question.
Okay.
I'm curious if you're concerned with his safety because, a kill order from Pompeo is, not something that they take lightly usually, and it's usually done for a reason. And now that he's out, actually, he's harder to kill at Belmarsh than he is now walking on the beach. Are we concerned with his safety?
I haven't heard at least too many public voicing of concern by his family, which is where I would take it the most seriously. He is in Australia. We aren't allowed to extradite him. I mean, that would be a huge violation of the plea agreement. However, personally, yes. I mean, and you saw those flight trackers. I mean, nobody bought that he was even gonna make it home. I'm also concerned from him just being in, I'm glad that he's free in the sense that he's not, in a cage anymore. But, how free are any of us with the kind of, like the stuff that's been happening in Australia? And that's one thing that I did learn from this whole thing, obviously following people in the UK and Australia, everywhere else is it's just the same playbook is happening in every Western country. So it's worrisome, it is. Especially, I'm sure no matter what, stuff like this has its effect, right? This is a positive thing, but it still has that chilling effect. Who else has been releasing anything classified? That used to be completely, when it showed criminality, that was like you're winning Pulitzers and whatnot, right? And now that's just not happening. So it is worrisome. I do feel like the more noise we make and the more we fight for free press and push people to report honestly, the better chances people like Assange and other whistleblowers have.
That's our talk. Give it up for Kendra.